Okay, we're back in business. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SCA's 28th monthly Zoom presentation. And a special thank you to our guests from our partners in this presentation, the Society for Industrial Archaeology. We're happy you took the time out of your summer evening to watch an SCA presentation. My name is Brian Gallagher. I'm the Vice President of the Society for Commercial Archaeology. I will be your host tonight. Incidentally, I'm also a member of the SIA, so it's a special treat having some SIA people with us. I hope you enjoy the show. And for anyone watching the recording of this episode of the SCA's monthly presentations who is not a member of the SCA, we earnestly ask you to consider joining. Funding for the various activities of the SCA comes almost exclusively from our membership. Just visit our website at www.sca-roadside.org and follow the links. Now let me introduce tonight's speakers. Born and raised in Texas, Irene Lulay is an archivist and a member of the SCA executive and the SCA's secretary. Irene currently lives in the Trans-Pecos area. She previously processed the SCA collection, where she became very acquainted with the organization's history. Beth Dodd, former SCA board member, has worked in architecture, libraries, and archives since 1984, with stints at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, University of Michigan, Columbia University, and the University of Texas, where she has directed the Alexander Architectural Archive since 1995. And as you know, the Alexander Architectural Archives at the University of Texas is the repository of the SCA's archival material. We look forward to listening to Beth and Irene as they talk about the proper care and the process of donating or selling personal collections focused on the American roadside and what you can do to facilitate that process. So without further ado, Irene and Beth, would you please unmute yourself and carry on with the presentation?
Thank you. Thanks everyone for, can you hear me fine, first of all?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes.
Yeah,
and we are indeed recording.
Yes, we are recording.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Well, howdy everyone. Thank you, Brian, for the introduction. And thank you everyone for attending today's presentation, Collecting the Roadside. Uh-oh. Okay. As you can see from this outline, we'll be going over the process of donating or selling your collection from the archivist and curator's perspective. Our goal is to provide y'all with an informative look into how the acquisition process looks like, and most importantly, what you can do to make the process easier. We'll start with a quick survey to get a general idea of what everyone's expectations are for this presentation. We'll also have a very helpful to-do list about what you can do as you prepare to sell or donate your collection. We'll also be discussing possible giving opportunities that you can provide. Finally, we'll talk about practical tips that you can do to maintain your collection in a safe and preservation sound environment. But first, another quick introduction to your map readers for this little road trip we're taking. And Beth, if you want to go.
Sure. So I'm Beth Dodd, and I was born in a Lincoln Highway town, Omaha, Nebraska. And I met my husband through SCA. My husband, Gregory Smith, some people may know him. He's also our bartender for the evening. We would be happy to tell our backstory over a Wisconsin style old fashioned, if you'd like. A little hint to the Dells trip. I've been a member of SCA since 1997, and I've worked in architecture libraries since 1984.
My turn. Great. Well, hi again. I'm Irene. As Brian mentioned, I've been an archivist for the past 4 years, which seems crazy. I actually worked as a graduate research assistant at the Alexander Architectural Archives under Beth, where I was hired to process the SCA's records. And that was a great introduction into like the quirky world of roadside enthusiasts, to say the least. As Brian mentioned, also, I currently live out in far west Texas, out in Marfa. If anyone's ever out there, please let me know. I would love to see anyone. But that's me. And to clarify how this presentation will go, since there's two of us talking, one of us will be driving, i.e. talking, while the other one will be doing kind of reading the map, i.e. changing the slides and dropping in some helpful links into the chat. So with all that out of the way, let's begin our survey about what you guys are up to and what you kind of want out of this presentation. All right, and we have 3 questions for y'all. So we're going to start with the first one. And we'll give you about a minute to answer. Or until everyone answers. And you should see it.
Oh,
Perfect.
Irene, perhaps you could tell people how do they answer? They just type into
Oh,
their
yes,
computer?
great. That's a great, thank you. So the first question is, why are you attending? And there's 3 options: because I care about my collection, its future, and maybe even my own legacy. I'm interested in documents of roadside architecture. And the 3rd option is, I'm just along for the ride, but I'm interested in the topic. And we're almost, this is survey question 1.
Okay, 100% answered.
No, we still have 65. We're getting there.
Ah, yes,
All right. Ooh, interesting.
it is interesting. We're going to share the answers with
Yes,
you.
yeah. As soon as we end the poll, yeah, we're not just gonna leave y'all hanging. All right, we're about to hit the minute, so I'm about to end the poll, right?
Yep.
Okay. End poll.
Okay, so
Okay, why are you attending? So about 43 of y'all said, because I care about my collection, its future, and maybe even my own legacy. 32, about 9 of y'all said, I'm interested in documents of roadside architecture. And about 7 of y'all said, I'm just along for the ride, which is more than fine. We're happy to have everyone. But it's really interesting to see about 12 of y'all, 43% said, oh, show results.
there you go. So that's that.
That's that. So that's really interesting to see.
Okay.
And then survey question 2, about to launch it, everyone, is what is your end goal? So we have 3 options here. Select all that apply. I want to sell my collection. I want to donate my collection and maybe even get a tax deduction. I want to make my collection openly available for research and scholarship. Okay. Quicker response times. Okay, interesting.
They're quick learners.
Yeah, y'all picking up this poll thing quickly. Okay, we're at half a minute. We're almost there. Okay. A couple more seconds, everyone.
Interesting results again.
Yeah. Okay, we're about to hit the minute mark. So if you are lingering, please answer. Okay,
All right.
show results. So here we have about 68 of y'all answered, and most of y'all, 15 answered, 63% answered, I want to make my collection openly available for research and scholarship. 11 said I want to donate my collection and get a tax deduction. And 5 of y'all said I want to sell my collection. Cool. All right, last question, everyone. Launch. And what is your capacity to achieve your end goal? And so we have a couple of options here. And I have the time to put into organizing and describing my collection. I have money to put into better archival storage. I have the means to hire a person to organize it for me. I have time but no money, which is me. I have money but no time, and I have limited resources altogether. So you can only pick one. That's how we have this set up. Great, responses are coming in. Oh, interesting.
That's good.
Yeah. All right, we have like 10 seconds left, everyone. Oh, good response as well. All right, about to end the poll. Share results. So about 72% answered, and most of y'all said, about 12 of y'all said, I have time to put into organizing and describing my collection. 2 answered, I have money to put into better archival storage. The next 2 weren't selected. And then the final 2, about 5 and 7, said, I have time but no money and I have limited resources altogether. So these are really, really helpful for us to kind of know as we continue on with the next hour.
Oh, hi, Irene. I'll just break in for 1 second and Beth.
Yeah.
It looks like some of the people didn't get they got the questions, but they didn't get the options on the screen, including myself. But but that's okay. We have 37 participants. So it sounds like we
Okay.
got most of them. I
Yeah,
think I didn't get them because maybe I'm a co-host. But anyways,
Yeah,
just,
Brian, yeah, that's exactly why co-hosts don't get it.
yeah,
We took the wheel away from you.
right. But if you got
You're
close
not
to
fit to drive.
37, yeah, if you got close to 37, then you got a lot,
Okay.
most of the
We
people.
apologize to those who wanted to, and we can talk about anything that at the very end of this presentation that you may have questions about. So
Yeah.
we'll try and make sure we hit your marks here.
All right, so we'll continue on. Thanks everyone for participating in the survey. It's very helpful for Beth and I to kind of see what everyone's expectations are. Nonetheless, we will focus on getting you on the road to success, especially with your collection. With all that said, let's hit the road with Beth.
All right. Okay. So now that we know a little bit more about our travel companions, let's talk about the process of how we're going to get to our destination together. So the very first step is deciding when is the time to let go of your personal collections. And there are many good reasons. Everybody has a good reason. And these might include you're out of space, you're moving, that nobody in your family wants it. I need the money, honey. I've stopped collecting. I may not be ready to let it go yet, but I want to make sure that it's taken care of in the future. In my experience, these are all very common reasons for letting go of personal collections. And now, if you want to sell your collection, depending on the quality, quantity, and rarity, you may want to contact an auction house or an estate representative. My archives, as a practice, does not purchase collections. But we do, in fact, ask for monetary donations. We don't require it, but we do have to ask that as part of my stewardship. And it also helps my donors know and understand more about the archives world. So tonight we're going to focus mostly on donations because that's where my expertise falls. But most of what we're conveying tonight will apply to selling your collection. And if you're still enjoying the thrill of collecting, like some of you might be, according to the survey results, this presentation is for you too, because you can just tuck the information in your pocket and use it later. Okay, so let's get started on donations. A great roadmap that I often offer to my prospective donors can be found from the Society of American Archivists webpage, and it's called Donating Your Personal or Family Records to a Repository. And I believe that Irene has dropped the link in the chat. And then also, by the way, the SAA, the Society of American Archivists, has a lot of other informative pages that I use later on in the process, specifically a guide to the deed of gift. And I would recommend that if you're considering donating your records, the deed of gift guide, it covers everything that any repository would use. It's pretty much a template. Now, also, the University of Michigan Bentley Archives has a great webpage too that they have about donating your records. And the great thing about that, where I point people to, is that it also offers some information on, like, let's say you want to scan anything. It gives really good best practices for you to do in your own home. So I would highly recommend that. University of Michigan, the Bentley Archives. So next, we have to figure out if we are indeed good travel companions. Whether we're talking about sellers and buyers or donors and archives, the starting point is determining if we're a good fit and can we meet each other's expectations. So getting to know you, we have to get to know each other. We're at the beginning stage of building some relationships that will be lifelong. And I say this because every donor that I work with really does become a friend in a sense, because I'm taking a part of their family and I'm taking care of their family. So it's kind of fun. That's my favorite part of my job, is working with donors. So just like any other collector, archival repositories have a collecting framework. And these are the things that I must adhere to. These are often called a collection development policy. So I'm asking you, what kind of criteria do you use in your own collecting? And if you want to, you can drop that in the chat. It might be interesting to see what people are collecting. And then for sales, this would be your service contact or your sales criteria. All right, now we need to get to know the collection together. You know your collection implicitly. I do not know anything about your collection. So if you strictly collect anything related to diners, for instance, think about it. Would you consider taking on somebody's lifelong collection of amusement parks? No matter how cool it is, because they are very cool and tempting. Or would you? I mean, there is room for negotiation. And for sales, you will need to create a manifest or an inventory of your sales. Physical condition. Simply put, would you travel with a person who has bed bugs? No, not at all. Even if that person might be a celebrity. I mean, it might be like your dream person to travel with, but would you travel with them if they had bed bugs? Well, it's the same thing with your collections. The worse the condition of the collection, the more costly it will be to preserve it and work with it. Insects and mold must be mitigated before a repository could bring the material into the building. And there are ways to do that for our celebrity collections, for things that we feel they are just, we have to have it and they're bug ridden. We have options, but it is very costly. It's costly for facilities. It basically, you blast freeze things, and it takes a lot of effort to prepare the material for the freezer. Now, are you packed for the trip yet? Are you fit to move? So for sales, you will need to be clear on who will pack, transport, or ship, and who will pay for that. And then, can you afford this trip? How do you find out? If you plan to take a tax deduction, you will need to declare your collection's value, and you may need to prove that value through an appraisal, depending on how high the value is. This is all dependent on tax laws. Auction houses or estate services may provide this service, but most likely at a fee or percentage of sales. Now, there is a conflict of interest for archives to pay for an appraisal because we are the receiver of the gift. So this is something that you, as the donor, will have to pay for, and you may want to consider whether the cost of an appraisal is worth the tax deduction. This is just a balancing act. So, and then finally, expenses. Donors lose sight of the fact that although it is a gift at their end, it is of great cost and investment for the receiver. A donation is not a free gift. There are no free kittens, no matter how much I love kittens, and I do love kittens. They do have a lifelong cost. And so would you plan a trip expecting others to pay for all the gas, food, and lodging? So, okay, so we're going to move on to the next, the checklist. All right. So whether you want to sell or donate, you will be more successful if you can do the following things. Market your collection and be prepared to write the life story of your collection. So marketing your collection, consider answering some of these questions. What inspired you to collect? Those shiny things that inspire you to collect are what you want to market. And why would you expect somebody else to want to buy your collection? So think of those arguments. Also, why is your collection special? How is it valuable? Archival repositories are extremely selective on what they take. And then provide the following in writing. Start writing these things down. Summarize the scope and provenance. Answer, when did you start collecting? What was the focus and criteria for your collection? Was it a certain subject or certain formats? Where did you shop? Did you trade? List your record types. Record types, for example, are things like photographs, photo albums, postcards, books, pamphlets, ephemera, 3D objects like spoons or SEA t-shirts. Think about what you created. Did you create a travel log or a journal? Did you take your own photography? Will you transfer the copyright for the things that you created? And then how about reference materials? Did you collect books on about collecting or about the subject matter? How is your collection organized? How do you find what you have? Hopefully it isn't just by memory, because what you are doing now to find your collection will help others find it. So are the items in any order? And if so, how are they arranged? And oftentimes these are kind of like by the format. So your postcards might be in a certain arrangement, or slides might be in another. So it could be by year, by or by geographical location, or by subject. Give this information per each format or series of types of collection material that you have. And how are you organized? Describe this. Do you have an inventory at the series level, like the postcard level, or even at the item level? Your chances of finding a good home are increased exponentially if you have an inventory. Okay.
Excellent.
Next slide. All right, giving opportunities. Do not be scared. Okay, did I mention a donation is not a free gift? It is not. Realistically, archives rarely have the budgets or staffing to match the needs of collections. So consider what your giving capacity is. Because unless a donor delivers the collection, it costs money to pack, ship, or transport. Unless the collection is already stored in those archival boxes, it costs money to rehouse into their forever homes. Unless the collection comes well organized, labeled, and described in a detailed inventory, it costs money to support staff to do this work. Again, archives must be very selective and are looking for collections considered to have high research value. Without monetary assistance, they will not be processed until they are fit into a current budget or a grant is acquired. Once all of this processing is done, though, it's spectacular, and your collection can start giving back to research and scholarship. And even that's when scanning projects might be considered. I often have donors ask me, I want all this stuff scanned before I give it to you, and it is unrealistic. So what is your giving capacity? Is it sweat equity? And it sounds like a lot of people here have time to do that kind of, according to the survey. Do you have a means to give your collection a good send-off? A lot of my donors actually deliver their collections to me, and that really is super helpful. Other than that, packing and shipping or transportation costs can be high. If you can fund archival supplies, that would be awesome. You can start storing them in archival supplies right now while you have them. And can you pay for staffing to process or for preservation and access? In a higher capacity, if you have it, philanthropic gifts keep on giving. Are you able and interested in funding support through an endowment? Give me a call. This could include the digitization projects and programming for outreach like SCA does. And it could also support scholarship, and it could support bringing people in to use your collection, which in turn goes into a scholarly continuum, a research continuum. The more research that goes out brings more attention to the collection. Or maybe you can't do it now, but you certainly can do it later. And what I'm talking here is planned giving after you pass, with bequests or charitable gift annuities, which a lot of people are reluctant to talk about, but it is a very good option. And if you do choose to go in that direction, you will want to include this in your will. So you may need to talk to your attorney or financial advisor, and the repository needs to be included in this discussion, because what you'll end up doing is a deed of gift. There have been situations where I get a call that somebody has passed and they have in their will to give me something, and it does not fit in my collection development policy, and I reject it. So just because you're passed away and and you have it in your will does not guarantee it's going to be in a good hand. So if you really care for your collection, which I know a lot of you do, make sure you include your repository. Okay, next. All right, so processing a collection. It's really important to get a general idea of what it means to process a collection and the associated costs. And this really depends heavily on the type of material you have, the condition they're in, and their organization and description that we've just talked about. Staffing levels also depend on the complexity and volume of the collection. We are in an era of slides. Everybody wants to give me their slide collections now. And unfortunately, I cannot take a lot of the slides because they're duplicates. They're duplicates. So staff will select, rehouse, catalog, and describe the material and prepare an archival finding aid for the collection. That's what other people use to find the material in your collection. And staff also have a lot of technical expertise that is needed to actually encode your finding aid so that people can use it online on the web. So, and we are also becoming more familiar with digital archives and born digital and born again, reformatted material. So an archivist would be happy to discuss any of this with you. Once again, that Bentley website at the University of Michigan is great. And all right, Irene, time for you to take the wheel.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, well, we're almost to our destination. As you all know, a little planning goes a long way, especially when you're planning on a trip, and that also applies to your collection. These next couple of slides provide simple, practical, and powerful tips on how to get your collection in tip-top shape for possible sale or donation. So we're talking about the care of your collection. And first, we're going to start with storing and housing. Be very conscious of where you are housing your materials. Keep your collections in a safe, clean, and preservation sound environment, i.e. out of the garage or next to the fire pit. Those are not good places to keep things. And by preservation sound environment, we mean a space with no pests, fire safe, locked, and stable temperature and humidity. If you're handling photographic materials, make sure you use gloves when handling and don't leave them out in the sun, of course. You'd be surprised. If you have postcards, don't just leave them on piles on the floor. Again, you'll be surprised what we've seen. You'll put a lot of time and effort into your collection, so it only makes sense that you actually want to take care of it for long-term preservation. All right, inventory and description. As Beth mentioned, providing information about your collection is absolutely crucial. I really can't emphasize that enough. Take time to evaluate your collection and see what information is missing and how you can provide this information now before it leaves your possession. Take time to label your slides, use pencils, don't use Sharpies, write your information on the edge. It's perfectly okay to use a slide mount. And you also want to document crucial information such as location and dates, though don't get too hung up too much on the details, especially with dates. You know, we don't need to know the exact moment or when the sun was when you took a photo. Just a general idea is also great. A good example of this is, say you take a picture of a teepee motel in Morton, Texas, because I know there's one out there. You just take a picture of the motel. The archivist or whoever is processing that collection has no idea where that motel is unless it's explicitly, you know, it says located in Morton, Texas, right in the photo, or it's somewhere on the photograph or somewhere near it where you've documented that. You have that information, and so it's only helpful for you to share that information. If you are trying to create an inventory, use an Excel spreadsheet. If you're documenting all the motels you visited, try to collect crucial information like state, city, zip code, name of motel. If you have a bunch of postcards, Beth mentioned this earlier, try to group them together, try to get them organized. Of course, you don't have to organize each postcard. You can just say, okay, these are all motels in Georgia. Great, that's one grouping. These are all motels in Texas. Great, another grouping. You want to, organize materials in the way that makes sense, of course, and what you kind of are trying to represent. Information is powerful, and only you hold what's more important, what's the most pertinent to your collection, which leads us to the next part, context of your collection. And to really drill it in, because Beth definitely mentioned this earlier, only you know what the context of your collection. What's the scope of the collection? Is it documenting one specific site of the roadside, For example, if you're photographing motels, can you add additional context or information for future researchers? Try to conceptualize why researchers will find your important, they will find your collection important, and why it will be important to their research. All of this is crucial to an archive, and it only strengthens public understanding of your collection. All of this is really important and really kind of basic information that really only strengthens your collection, especially to a repository or to a buyer. All right, next slide. All right, and to sum it up, and again, to really drill it in, write your collection special history, get it in order, store it in a good home. If you can purchase acid-free material, that's great. We would love that, because as you can see from the menu that we had earlier, they were very expensive. You'll be surprised how quickly that adds up, and they don't provide free shipping. You wish they did, but they don't. Label your containers and slides, of course, and create an inventory in a spreadsheet. And we say Excel spreadsheet because we often use spreadsheets that are created by donors for data manipulation. We use them for special projects. We might take this Excel document of all the motels that you've documented in Texas and create some kind of map on it online for people to look at. And if you have slides, you can kind of connect those slides to that location. That's just one project that can go beyond just donating your collection.
It's all about the data, baby.
Yes, that is definitely true. All right, and now we have a couple of case studies for y'all.
Yeah, we thought that maybe it would be helpful for you to see what the story of a donation. And I selected the Tate collection of travel postcards because it does fit in, and I think that you might be able to take away some of the things I'm going to talk about real quick. So, and it will also show you how long a relationship might be before the records get to the repository. So in 2005, I was contacted by one of my faculty members who is a friend of a postcard collector. And think about the people, my faculty are the people that actually use the collection, and they direct their students to use the collection. So they really do know and understand what their needs are. And so Lloyd Tate is a historian, and he and his wife were faculty members. He is keenly interested in travel around the world, and he has been collecting postcards since 1940, and when he inherited a collection from an acquaintance. So I called up Lloyd, and in my first conversation with him, I sussed out a lot of the information that you proactively can have ready to go in a document. I learned that there were approximately 50,000 travel postcards that were primarily photographic images, because that's what his selection criteria was. Approximately 60 to 80 countries were represented, and the dates span from 1910 to the present, which was 2005 at the time. He has them arranged geographically by country and then city, and he had them stored in 56 stackable metal cabinets that he said would convey with the collection. And he promised me that he would provide an inventory. So after I got that information, I turned around and I contacted my faculty because I needed to have justification for taking on a collection. So the faculty responded in the following ways. It's an essential research collection for the study of place. Past research has found that postcards offer views not readily available. For example, details of cathedrals. Postcards capture points in time. Postcards are often produced from professional fine-grained photography. One faculty member said that postcards often offer copyright-free images for publication, and that's not necessarily true. So, but I'm just giving you the responses I got, and I'm learning about things in the meantime. Postcards are collected with a historian's eye, and that brings up another point that we hadn't drilled into you earlier, that you are an expert. As you become a collector, you become an expert. And so one of the things that I also will ask from people is to please provide information about yourself as a collector. And in this case, Lloyd is a historian. I mean, you may not be a historian, but you certainly know your subject areas because you're a collector. You're the best expert, in fact, and I rely on my experts. Okay, postcard documents cityscapes long gone due to war, natural disasters, and development. If you're a postcard collector and you want to market your collections, these are all very good reasons that any of you can use. Faculty find it difficult to locate images of urban scenes and the evolution of place. That may not be the same anymore because this was back in 2005 and a lot has happened since then. Okay, and then here are the types of faculty that were interested in this collection: landscape, interior design, architectural history. And then history, geography, urban studies scholars were also potential users of this material, as would the visitors to our Charles W. Moore Center for the Study of Place. All right, so then I paid some site visits to Lloyd because I needed to see this material. And I actually had 2 site visits with him, one in 2014 and then one in 2020, I believe. So in 2014, I learned that I learned even more, because the more you spend time with your donor, the more you learn. And what I often do is I will, now that we have these iPhones or a smartphone, I will record my conversation with permission, because the first time a person tells their story is the best capture. Because if you ask a person to do this again, it won't come out the same. There is so much passion involved with donors. So, so he told me how he started collecting his postcards. He was 10 and he got his collection from Mrs. Leahy, who she received the mail in mail from Europe. And she was the little old lady next door. And that's how it got started. That was the seed that sprouted a collector. He has integrated them into his collection, and they range from 1900 to 1919. He started collecting really in 1950 when on a trip to Chicago. It was a family trip to the American West. And after high school, traveled to the US, he grew out of the shoe boxes he was keeping his postcards in. So now we see an exponential growth in the collection. And in 1961, he took a summer trip to Europe and added a couple thousand more. And then he traveled the Route 66. So as you can see, he just got the bug that we all have. His subject matter, he stuck to it, to cities and landscapes. The cities, in cities, he was fond of aerial photography. And then his organization goes from general to specific. His aerials, they start with aerials, and then he moves to neighborhoods to specific locations. He is a person who's very, very detail oriented, and he found that cataloging is a simple concept, but not easy to do. And so he was trying to just file each and every single postcard in a particular place. And I kept telling him, no, as long as you get it in the bucket, we're good. So then he told me about his slides. He had his trip photography, but he really relied on his postcards as the comprehensive primary document, and his slides were supplemental. His wife was there and she also took shots. She basically said, can you spell OCD? Because Lloyd is super detail oriented. So his concerns I was able to alleviate a lot. I can tell you now, now that we've received the collection, we did not take his slides because a lot of his slides duplicate what we already have in the collection. So be prepared for some disappointments and maybe just part of a collection going. Then in 1970s, he started noting the date of the purchase on the bottom left corner of his postcards. Then he stopped doing that though, because it got to be too much. And he stopped doing that in the late 1990s. So, but he does have a trip chronology, and that's what you see in the middle there. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's page 1 of 19 pages. He purchased roughly 80% of it. 20% were acquired from other sources. The word got around that he was a postcard collector, and so people started giving him. So his collection started to exceed beyond the places that he personally traveled. And let's see, mostly are photographic. He confirmed that. And then we start talking about a bequest. So he was still actively collecting. He was happy, but he just started thinking about what am I going to do with my collection? I don't have children. And this is my lifelong work. So we talked about a bequest. So in 2005, he did follow through and worked with his lawyer and our University of Texas development officers and with me. And we did a deed of gift and he created a bequest. He also had a lot of digital images and we were not interested in that at the time. So again, we had another visit in 2020. And when I visited him the first time, I noticed that there were postcards all over his house. So I told him, you got to clean up your act, man, and get them filed, because otherwise we will not take the ones that aren't filed. So, and it takes a lot of time to do this work. It's fun because you get to see them again and you think about things, but you can go down rabbit holes and you don't get the work done. So he was able to get them all filed. And then what happened was we started talking about a finding aid, and it's in really good order. It could be used right now. So what we really need to do is get a finding aid out there so the world knows we have Lloyd Tate collection, and that would take about $7,700 to fund a graduate research student that we hire from our School of Information. We're very fortunate to have these students, and they gain a lot of experiential learning, and we also learn about the bleeding edge of information technology. So sadly, Mr. Tate's health started to decline, and then we had to move to a new location, but we were able to manage going and picking up the collection, because it was either waiting till he passed away or he would have to move, and the move was happening first. So we had the means to do it, and you can see my great crew of very powerful and strong women that helped me move these cases. Greg was also there too, so I'll just give him credit. So that is pretty much the story of a donation, and then I'm going to pass it to Irene.
I will quickly just talk about the SCA archive, which is also located at the Alexander Central Archives. One of the reasons, probably one of the main reasons it came to the attention of Beth and her staff is because Beth was on the board for many years and met her husband there. Once Beth and her staff determined that the SCA records fit within the collecting scope of the Alexander Central Archives, it was donated by SCA. And the SCA archive documents the activities and business of the organization. So we have materials about events, publications, board meetings. I read a lot of minutes and I learned a lot of names. And these are just some of the materials you can see. You'll find these are event ephemera. And then we also do have a very small reference section of materials, and these are some of the photographic materials. I love these signs. It was really, really cool to look at the photographs that were in the collection. But really, the SCA archive just documents SCA and its business and its history. And I really applaud SCA because they just didn't donate the archive. They actually gave funds to hire a GRA, which was me back 5 years ago. I cannot believe that. And they also
a great investment, as you can see.
Yeah, I'm still here. And they also gave more funds to hire another GRA to do a records management project with the organization. And so, they just didn't give the donation, the archive, they also gave funds. And that's really important because, as Beth mentioned, you never know when that archive is going to be processed if you're not giving funds. It really kind of depends on your budget and the demands of the repository at the time. So I really do applaud them for doing that. It's just another quick example of what it means to donate. And
so that concludes our presentation, and we are very interested in any questions you might have. And I believe that Brian asked they put the questions in the chat.
That's it. That's
give him the wheel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we do have quite a few questions for you. And I'm sure there'll be more as it goes along as well. But first of all, I'd like to thank you, both Irene and Beth, for an excellent presentation, most informative. I didn't know actually really any of the things you were talking about. And it really kind of opened my eyes because, you think about it, but you don't know the ins and outs and the actual, the mechanics and the details of how these things are accomplished. So this has been, really, really helpful. Is Nancy, are you still on online, Nancy? Yeah, she had a couple of questions.
Yeah, yes, I am, Brian, and I'm sorry if I dominated the chat box, but it got my
Okay.
brain
Do you wanna
going.
open it? Do you wanna open it? Tell them you went to archive school.
Yeah. So yes, Brian, what would you want me to ask my question?
Yeah, could you ask your question? You had a couple of questions there, and
Yeah.
you might as well ask them directly.
Well, yeah, and another member, I think it was Guy Carwheel mentioned it too, but for those of us, this was very archives focused, which I mean is flat stuff. But what about those of us with many objects from the roadside, which I have a sense might be like some kind of quirky museum that might be interested in our items, which seems like a tougher project to kind of find. In other words, do archives want 3D items like travel souvenirs, or are we going to have to find some kind of museum?
There is, yeah, that's a good question, Nancy. And I can tell you, we know from all the great prizes that come off of a tour bus that there are lots of 3D things that come out. We do collect 3-dimensional items. And there is a soft and foggy area between museums and archives. Museums are more focused on items, specific items, whereas in archives, it is the sum of the parts. And just know that we do collect 3-dimensional. I hope that answers your question.
What kind of 3-dimensional though? Would it support the flat, the sort of,
Yes.
paper?
Yeah,
That's my
we are
bad.
not format specific. If it supports a particular subject area or research area, then we will collect it. So we have all sorts of things. We've got, well, in the SCA archive, we've got t-shirts,
Yep. Towels.
Wow, okay.
Yeah,
And so there's really what I gathered from this presentation overall is you're really dealing with extremely focused people that have a collection that is very focused. For those of us who are just all over the map, we're probably better off with just having an estate sale, probably.
possibly. I mean, I think in going through this self-reflection of answering some of these questions, it will reveal the value. If you are a person that only collects windmills, and there might be a windmill museum out there, or a university that also has research about windmills or that type of mechanics, it could be very informative for research. So these are things that you can call an archivist or talk to a place, and it's like I say, it's a conversation. And yes, it could be an estate sale or it could be a garage sale. But if it is really a focused collection, it might work for an archives or a museum. Really just depends.
Thank you for giving us super insight into your work, because I've learned, I took a archives management class once, but I've gotten new insight into the way y'all really deal with like donors. As a longtime fundraiser, it's interesting that you are dealing like as a fundraiser might. Thank you, y'all.
Yep. You bet. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, that was an interesting answer. We had a comment here from Peter Glazer. Peter, are you still on the line? Yeah, Pete made the comment that Kodachrome slides are among the best documents of the roadside. But I heard you say, Irene and Beth, that you, with the case study you gave, you didn't take slides. So Peter, maybe would you like to expand on your comment a little bit?
Just in my experience, I think that Kodachrome slides are among the best
Yes.
for resolution and documentation.
Absolutely,
the
Peter.
best,
And
the
you,
best
as
records on the roadside.
information professional, know that. I never said I don't take slides. I said in a particular situation,
Okay.
I did not take slides. So it's part of an appraisal process. And If I see somebody wants to give me their slides and there's no description on them, there's nothing on the slide mount, there's nothing, I can't afford to take it. I can't hire somebody to look at each slide and guess where it is, when it was taken. I mean, it's useless unless it has
Yeah.
that description. And also, you're right, there are certain slides that the different processes, you'll have color shifts. Even with color shifts, there might be some really valuable information in that image. So it is an appraisal process, and it is a conversation that we have. But I don't flat out not take slides, but we are in a time where everybody has slides to give.
You certainly don't want like a document dump. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. Nancy mentioned that Guy had a question, and he has a second one too. And I think this is a really good question because just as I misinterpreted you saying you don't take slides, I also thought I heard you say that you didn't, in the case study you gave, you didn't take the digital material that they had. Guy, are you still on the line? Guy
Yes.
Caborio? Yeah, Guy,
Hi,
could you ask
Guy.
your question directly to our presenters?
Okay, great. Well, let's roll back a few years. We're talking about the Thomas Price art collection at the Alexander Archives.
Guy has
And-
used our archives. Yes, thank you, Guy.
and thank you. And in particular to the Jack Tar Hotel, it's like the documents that were donated were sepias, and they have a limited lifespan and so on. So what I did was I took that information and I recreated drawings in my computer using AutoCAD. So if I have something that's digital, do you want printouts, or would you accept I don't know, some sort of digital format like a PDF or a JPEG? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, many.
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question, and it is particular to, I know your research interests, and I love that you have published about Jack Tar, and it's an important project because of that, and because we have the Thomas Price collection. But so there's a lot that goes on with architectural drawings, especially prints. And as long as they're in a dark space, and depending on the type of process, you may not lose your image. In fact, it can regenerate itself in some cases, depending on the process. However, if you have gone through, and we're talking about this research continuum here, right? So Guy came and he used the collection and he produced scholarship, and that scholarship is also worthy of collecting, and it supports the original collection. So we have a research continuum going here. It really depends, Guy, on the capacity of the repository. If they are at a point where they can start collecting digital is really challenging because you have to have a whole new skill set, and you have to have the capacity to provide access to them. It is still kind of a non-traditional area, but it is the area that we are moving into. To me personally, I'm glad I'll be retiring.
Thanks, Beth.
However, there are brilliant people out there who now know how to work with digital archives, and you will hear about it, I guarantee you, daily in the news about files getting wiped from places that are of importance. These are digital files. We're talking digital forensics. We're talking about how do you describe them. So there's a lot of effort that goes into it. So Guy, as I mentioned in the presentation, we have a relationship and we will continue to build that relationship. I would like to talk to you offline about what you have, but in the big picture, I think it really depends on the repository's capacity and how it supports the collections and the research interests.
I see.
involved. That's a
Well,
big
thank you. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
I have a couple of questions. The SCA archive. So how do people, if they donate their material, like the SCA, for example, to the archive, how is it kept updated? Is there like every year people are to send this, or we send the stuff in, or how does that work?
Well, for the SCA archive, and Brian, I manage the digital archive. I kind of manage the administrative side of it. So the business meetings, all of the stuff that you send through email, I kind of evaluate and put on our digital archive. And during our records management project, we set up file naming standards. And so I go in and change all of that for you guys for free.
Great,
So I maintain it on that end, but we also get emails occasionally from people, former board members who are like, I have some interesting stuff related to the SCA. Do you guys want it? And that's when we loop in Beth, and she, because we have the finding aid that I created when I process the collection, we can see what's missing. And we can evaluate, okay, is this something that we would like to accept? A lot of times we get people who are like, we have a lot of publications, do you want this? And we're like, well, we have a certain amount of copies that we keep. But that's really kind of how we do it with current things that are going through right now. I kind of maintain the digital part, but historical materials, if anyone does have anything related to SCA, directly to SCA and its business, do let us know, because that would be of interest.
Yeah. There's a difference between an archives that the legacy records are done. I mean, it is not an actively producing creator. So SCA is still active and it's creating records. And that's why we had that second donor funded project, and they created a records management schedule, and that tells you how to name your files, when do you submit them to the archive, and what we don't want. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does. That answers the question quite well. The other thing I might mention, and I'd be interested in your reactions to this, Irene will know about this, is that, the SCA hosted or took on this Jim Seelan motel database thing. It was strictly electronic. And it was a database of like every motel, or I'm not 100% familiar with it, but with a lot of the motels throughout the US and all the ones he visited, and some details about it and so on and so forth. So he asked the SCA, do you want it? And we said, yeah, we'll take it. So it's on the SCA website, and people can sign in and they can search this thing. It's searchable. But I mean, we don't really do anything to curate it or update it or anything with it. It just sits there and people can take it for what it's worth. Now, what's your feeling about if people don't have the money or they don't have the time, but they've got especially electronic, and I'm talking only electronic records, that they could give to the SCA? Do you think it's a good idea, or should we stay away from that type of thing?
Well, is the SCA's mission to collect other people's collections?
Well, I mean, it could be.
Okay.
That's undefined.
So
Right?
what we will say is that clearly the records of the SCA's archive are those records that are generated through the actions of the Society of American Archaeology. So it is not part of what would be collected by us, because it isn't part of your administrative work.
Right.
It's
I
something you
understand that.
collect. So keep that in mind when you start collecting things. Unless it is a tool that you use actively and it is something that is part of what you produce as an association, you should be very careful about that, because it is a huge, huge responsibility as a steward of that record, of those records. So
That's good advice. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's actually
it kind of brings us into a question that I know a lot of people, it's like the $1 million question, is how do I find a repository for my collection? And we have anticipated that question, and we can tell you some really quick and dirty advice. One thing you could do is see who's teaching this in these areas, and find if they have a repository associated with them. And there are a couple of things that you could do. And let me get my notes out. that you can use. So there is this website called Archive Grid. And Archive Grid is an online database and service that has taken on legacy files, like legacy information about where archives are, all the way back to the dawn of time, where there used to be a National Union catalog of manuscript collections, NUCMUC. So they have all of these records, and it is an OCLC. If you're a library person, it's a product that they maintain. And basically what you do is you go into Archive Grid and you can do a search. And you start with like a broad term like roadside architecture, which is on the left-hand side here. And I'm sorry it's small, but what will happen is that you'll get a list of repositories or list of collections. And in that collection, you can see where they're taken care of, where they live. So for instance, I did roadside architecture. And that's a list view, but then you can go into this other view, which
Summary
is the
view.
summary view. Can you guys see the cursor where Irene's?
Brian, can you see my cursor?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you can click on summary view and that takes it and it puts it into different facets. So you can do people, groups, places, archives, archive locations, and topics. So what I did is I like to click on the topic of roadside architecture. So you click on roadside architecture and you get the following slide. And it narrows down your search. And then here, looky here, Society of Commercial Archaeology records. But it also goes down into John Margulies's Roadside American Transparencies at the Library of Congress. Oh no, that's at the Henry Ford Museum. So he's got collections everywhere. But as you can see, you just drill down to an area where it might be matching where your records might match, like here's signs and signboards. So here you can see there's another John. John is also there's at the University of Arizona, California Historical Society, the Getty. So this is one way of doing this. Then here's another resource that is a rabbit hole. It's called the Digital Public Library of America, and you can do the same type of search. This is going to bring you digitized content. Now, it's a little bit backdoor way of doing it, but you can see where these digitized content originated. And so, so you can see National Archives at College Park.
Oh, that's the University of Minnesota,
Yeah, Indiana Landmarks.
Detroit Historical Society.
Yeah, I did another search for Lincoln Highway Association, so you can see where Lincoln Highway material is. And then finally, the Internet Archive is another fun rabbit hole. And it's the Wayback Machine where they've actually started archiving websites, but also you have more content. And yeah, it's digitized content, but however, you can actually trace to see where this material is.
Right here, down here,
Kept.
collection says.
Yeah, in their collection. So Newberry Library. So anyway, I hope that is a little bit helpful. Really, just gain an understanding of your collection and what's sparkly about it, what makes it unique, and if it would be something that you can consider a researcher might be interested in, then it might be worthy for an archive. But you know, if you don't think it's unique enough, or you can still go the sales route. Okay, so there are different ways that you can take care of your collections. I did notice in the survey results that people are interested in making them openly available for scholarship. So it might be something there. You may want to start your journey with archives.
Okay.
Could I mention something?
Go ahead, Joseph.
There's one way that hasn't been mentioned that you can do something with the collection. I only answered the first question in your survey because I never really considered what I was doing collecting things.
Mhm.
because what I was doing was photographing ghost signs in
Yep.
Chicago for
I
decades.
know you, Joe.
And then I ended up, after about 35 or 40 years, actually getting a book published.
Yep.
So they got collected and put together in that format as an alternative, because I never thought of the, because I had them in slides and then and filmed the color negatives, and then I went digital, and I finally got them all in scanned into one format to go to the publisher. And I never thought of these as anything that would get to somebody else. So, but they got out in a different format.
Well,
Without,
that's the purpose of this presentation, is to just spark some thought about it and maybe get you to start thinking about things. And I would be very hesitant in going off and scanning everything you have, because by the time it actually is time for it to go to a collection, it may not be of the quality that an archive would take. We have in the past been offered scans where a donor went off and scanned everything, but the quality was very poor. It wasn't what you would find at that Bentley site, the University of Michigan Bentley site. And so I caution you on taking that kind of initiative. I'm not saying you did that, Joe. I'm just saying
no,
this in
I
general for the rest, but
had a professional person doing
Yeah.
the scanning.
professional people do scan, but they don't know and understand the criteria that an archives would need
Okay, well,
and
in
would
this
accept.
case, the publishers spelled out some criteria. I guess he did it to meet the publisher's criteria, that they may well have been different from what an archive
different.
was.
I would say, Joe, what you ended up doing is you were the scholar that would use the collection. So you have produced something out of your collection that is very meaningful, and you're the expert on it. And I know you are, because I've seen and attended a number of your presentations. So it's great that, and that is one thing that we did not mention, is that you could be the scholar. You could write something about what you've collected. And really, I think, just providing the story of your collection is really helpful too.
Okay, I'm gonna just pose one more question. Thanks a lot, Joe. That was an interesting question. And then I know that Irene has some links that she wants to bring up too. So Lillian posed the question, what about books? What if you have a collection of books that are all on a certain subject matter? What do we do with those?
You could do the same thing, except work with a librarian and not an archivist. And there are resources, like there's OCLC WorldCat, where you can see where certain types of subject areas might be available. That is out of my wheelhouse. I have not been a librarian for many, many years, but see where things might be, where certain subjects might be taught.
There are directories of special collections libraries.
Exactly.
And yeah, like you were saying, check with a librarian. We used to do that all the time. People would have a hoard of books of a very narrow area. And I'd say, yeah, there's a library up in Montana that collects that stuff.
Yeah, exactly, Peter.
Yeah.
But I would also caution you again, just as archives are very selective now, so are libraries. And my particular library is a huge research library that has been around for over 100 years. And so we are an embarrassment of riches with our collections, and it may be duplicative and it may be denied. However, you can at least peruse the expertise of the librarians to maybe help you. It is heartbreaking, and I've experienced this myself, when you have to take a lifetime of collecting of books and give it to half price books. That happened in my particular family, but that was the reality of it. So
Okay.
If you have books and if there's special books, if there's special collections, books like of a certain age or rarity, then that might be of interest.
Okay, thanks a lot, Beth. Now, Irene, did you say you had some links you wanted to post or?
Yes, but I think I'll have to stop sharing to do that, Brian, because.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Just, is that okay? Great.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's- Are there any more questions? We can still answer.
Well, we're starting to run a little bit overtime. It's 9:15 Eastern and 8:15 Central. So some of our audience is slipping away.
Well, we can share them out later too, Brian. I mean, we have
Yes,
everyone's
absolutely.
contact information, so we can send
Yeah.
out links to everyone later.
Yeah,
What were they, Irene?
They're going to be the Archives Grid, the Internet Archive, the Bentley, and the SCA's Guide to Donating materials that are going to be dropped in, that are going to be shared with everyone, just as a quick little resource.
One final question for those of us who drink. What was Greg serving you tonight? It looked like it was non-alcoholic.
It was, oh, Nancy, I can't believe you're asking this question. It was a Wisconsin style.
Sure.
It was what we drank in the Wisconsin Dells. It was the old fashioned.
Oh, yes,
So-
the was it the Prez or the?
With the cognac.
Yeah,
with the-
with the brandy. Is it with brandy? Greg,
What?
what is in it?
Oh, what's in the drink?
Hey, bartender.
Hey, well, the Wisconsin Old Fashioned is an old fashioned made with brandy instead of whiskey.
Oh.
But I actually did a lot more to it than that. So
It was very
I-
light.
Thank
Yeah.
goodness, thank goodness.
In Wisconsin, they top it depending on whether you ask for sweet or sour. Sweet has Sprite or 7-Up, and sour has Squirt. So
Oh,
I do a hybrid, and I also use a nice German brandy, which we got at one of the restaurants in Milwaukee.
But
So
in Wisconsin, they use.
they use Korbel, which
Mhm.
is like cheap,
Yes.
decent mixing brandy. I use Osbach, which is a nice German brandy.
Maybe we should have a cocktails of the roadside presentation.
yeah,
That would be great.
that would be a
Another
good one.
It could be an interactive participation presentation.
Oh, and I also use blood orange, so it gives it a nice red
Oh,
color.
yeah.
So it's been tricked out quite a bit. So
I've got a collection of mixer's manuals, so some of them are pretty old. I'll check it out.
Hey,
Okay, now
it
Irene.
is great to see a bunch of old friends here. Thank you for attending.
Yeah. Irene, was there something that you are going to post up there or
Oh,
not?
I was going to send it out through email, Brian.
Oh, I see. Okay, great. Well, in that case, you know what, I'm going to thank our speakers again for an excellent presentation, and one that obviously engendered a lot of interest from the viewers. And I think you will see a lot more people watching this on the recording as well. So just want to remind everybody that the recording will probably be up tomorrow morning, and that will be available to any SCA member and also to other people as well. So tell your friends and interested people about it so they can watch it there. Now, just before we go, I'd like to remind everybody about it next month, when Preservation Houston will be hosting the SCA to a presentation by Mark Lamster on the story of the House of the Century near Angleton, Texas, not far from Houston. That's Tuesday, not Wednesday, September the 13th at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, not 8 Eastern and 7 Central. So keep that in mind, but everybody will be getting an email about that as well, and as usual, where they can sign up for the recording. So with that, I think I will say thank you again. I will be sending you guys the recording as well as all the chat, and I will wish everyone a good night.